Reports of Assad's death in a plane crash are Russian disinformation, says Ukrainian intelligence. The loss of the plane's radar signal was likely due to actions by the crew following Russian instructions during the flight. Israel has reportedly carried out airstrikes on a research center in Damascus, believed to be developing Iranian missiles. Turkish-backed SNA rebel forces have reportedly already entered Manbij. The SNA, advancing through northern and western parts of Manbij, entered the central town, which has been held by Kurdish forces since 2016. And Russian propagandist Sapankov is trying to be funny. In Manbij, they didn't even remove the flags from our base when we retreated. Syrian rebel forces are preparing to enter Latakia. Maymim, just close of Latakia, is reportedly being hastily evacuated by Russians. At this point, the Russian presence in Syria is not just hanging by a thread, as Rybar claims, it is essentially eliminated. There will be no Russians in Syria, and subsequently none in Africa either. This is called checkmate. I agree with the rest of what was said. Well, the Russian Foreign Ministry has spoken out about the position in Syria. As of 1900 hours, unfortunately, one can draw some disappointing conclusions. Russia's military presence in the Middle East region is hanging by a thread. Seeing the lack of activity of the Russian group of forces in Syria, Kurdish formations began to block individual objects of the Russian armed forces in the Euphrates region. Jebla is under the control of armed groups. The Khmeimim base is cut off. Russian military ships have been withdrawn from the port of Tartus to the roadstead in order to reduce the threat from rogue gangs who have decided to fire on them. Positions at the oil refinery in the Horns Desert are also blocked. We have no right to talk about the plans of the Russian military leadership. What was decided in high offices has absolutely no significance on the ground, simply because there was no initiative on the ground. Waiting for instructions from Moscow on Sunday, not understanding that it was necessary to act outside the framework of the system to attempt another attack on Pristina, or to rush to the defense of South Ossetia did not work out. At the time, these were the very events that went down in history and glorified Russia precisely because people on the ground acted on their own initiative, taking on much more than was allowed by the instructions or directions that no one gave. This time, everything was done systematically correctly. Inertly and indifferently, in other words. The Russian Pantsir-S sadly burns out in the outskirts of Damascus, set ablaze by the rebels. And Russian propagandists continue. The benefit from withdrawing from Syria equals 1,500 Mavics per day to Ukraine. Simple and straightforward math. Now seriously. 1. Loss of a transit point for our supplies to Africa. 2. Loss of a naval base in a region dominated by NATO countries. 3. Loss of the ability to kill radicals from Central Asia outside the territory of the Russian Federation. It is a great shame for those hundreds of our men from the Wagner PMC, the Special Operations Forces, the Aerospace Forces, and the Russian Ministry of Defense who gave their lives for the Syrian war. It was they, and not the brave Syrians, who saved Assad's SR from destruction in 2015 to 2020. However, there are also advantages if the bases are abandoned. 1. The group's supplies cost Russia at least $3 million a day. Estimated, that's 1,500 Mavics per day. 2. Troops are needed for the final battle in 2025 for Ukraine. 3. Stop helping strangers when our own are in need. For the first time, Ukraine speaks out on the fall of Assad. Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha says Ukraine is ready to work on restoring relations with Syria in the future, but emphasizes the need for regional stabilization and security. Assad has fallen. Dictators who rely on Putin are always betrayed, Sybiha added. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas calls the fall of Assad's regime a positive and long-awaited event, linking it to the weakness of Russia and Iran. She emphasized the EU's priority of regional security and vowed to work with all constructive partners to stabilize the region. As the controversial Russian politician Zhirinovsky, now deceased, said in 2016, Putin supported Assad for 13 years after the Arab Spring for a reason. He and Iran did everything possible to ensure that oil and, primarily, gas from Qatar, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia could not flow to the EU via the cheapest route, through pipelines. Now, after the fall of Assad's regime, in the event of stabilization in Syria, pipelines could be laid through Syria and Turkey to the EU, which would forever deprive Putin of the ability to blackmail Europe and diversify energy supplies.
Мы же понимаем, почему в Сирии война. Если мы там не будем подавлять оппозицию Башару Асаду, завтра вся арабская нефть и газ придут в Европу, у нас ничего покупать не будут.
Если бы Россия не вошла туда и не удержала режим Башара Асада, то уже сегодня бы стоял очень остро вопрос выживания российского бюджета. Потому что воюют там 3 газовые трубы. Катар, открыты были самые крупные мировые запасы газа, 51 триллион, там 50 миллиардов тонн конденсата, 2/3.
Это резко сократило нашу долю на рынке газа.
Да. Ну и Иран 1/3 получил, это огромный запас. И первый маршрут, который стали прокладывать, это в Европу. И прокладывать через территорию Сирии и в Турцию, где Турция становилась оператором поставки газа. Но для этого надо было Россию выдавливать, пожалуйста, Украина.
Шли в сирийский конфликт, чтобы обеспечить сбыт Газпрома, я правильно?
Ну и до выживания своих, да.
And now it's clear. Turkey has emerged as the primary beneficiary of the regime change in Syria. The United States retains control over its zone, with no other parties challenging it. Iran was one of the most active participants in the conflict. Now Iran is engaged in active negotiations with Turkey about Syria's future. Arab monarchies. Paradoxically, they are likely to strengthen their position. Opposition groups in the south connected to these monarchies, along with their allies among the Druze and Christians, timely initiated uprisings, which predetermined Damascus's fall. Russia is losing influence, but retains a chance to remain in Syria, albeit under new conditions, as one of the second-tier forces. If Russian military bases in Syria are evacuated, it will complicate Russian operations in Africa, but not render them impossible. Key main issue: gas, or more specifically, pipelines. Project 1, the Arab Gas Pipeline. Initially conceived as a pipeline connecting Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, Turkey, and even Israel. Project 2, the Qatar-Turkey Pipeline. This project was derailed by Assad's intransigence.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. Also, if you want to support Warthog Defense, please become our member and get early access to new videos, exclusive members-only videos, and become administrator in comment section. The membership link is in the description.
Every day. We had a guy last week, it's 6 rescues in 6 days. You know, he's doing the job every day.